We're live. Hi, my name is Jarrett. I want to welcome you to the UMC All Access Facebook Live. I'm your host, and we're live in Los Angeles. Welcome aboard. This past month was Pride Month, and we're also coming into the beginning of the Outfest Film Festival, where we celebrate LGBTQ filmmakers and their films. And obviously, just a couple of months ago, Moonlight won the Oscar for Best Picture. So everyone's excited about that and kind of asking the question, what does that mean for the future of LGBTQ filmmaking? We brought together some distinguished folks to talk about that and me. So we're going to get into that discussion right now. I want to introduce you to all of the people that we have joining us. He is lauded as the father of Black gay cinema. He's a writer, producer, director of Noah's Ark, Punks, The Skinny, and Blackbird, which is currently available on UMC. And he's currently a writer-producer on Being Mary Jane, which will be coming back to BT on July 18th.
Yes.
Welcome, Patrik-Ian Polk.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. Glad to be here.
All right. They are the multi-talented artists who may be most known as the creators of the GLAAD Award-winning The DL Chronicles, and they are one of the few people who can say that Beyonce sang at their wedding and they got married at the Grammys.
Yeah, we had to let her go and do it.
Fine, Beyonce. You know how
Fine,
she
Beyonce.
shows up at a wedding. So they are Quincy and Deondray Gossfield. Welcome.
Thank you.
Then, seated to my right, she has been named by Newsweek magazine as one of the people changing the face of Hollywood, which is a nice way to be known,
Yes.
right? For years, she's been on the front line of inclusion and representation as one of the few out Black and LGBT producers and screenwriters. Her work has earned her 2 Daytime Emmys, and she's the head of Logos Documentary Films, which will air Forbidden in August. Our Taj Paxton, how's it going?
Thank you. It's going well. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Yeah.
All right, and joining us via remote, he has been making films for over 20 years and has been nominated 4 times for an Independent Spirit Award. He's the writer and director of the drama Brother to Brother, starring Anthony Mackie, and The Happy Sad. Both are available on UMC right now. He's Rodney Evans. How's it going, Rodney?
It's going well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And finally, she is an award-winning documentarian who, before directing the films The Promised Land and The New Black, was an investigative reporter for ABC News, and she's director of documentary programs at CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. Please welcome Yoruba Richen as well. How's it going, Yoruba?
Good. Nice to be here.
Thank you for being here. All right, I want to let everyone know that's watching right now. Make sure to join the conversation. You can go into the comments below. Give us your questions, your comments, and we will include them into the conversation as we go along. So I want to start out this discussion with The New Black from Yoruba, because it talks about the intersection of being Black and being gay, and touches on some other places as well. And I'm curious about the way that we define LGBTQ filmmaking. What does that mean to all of you? But first, I want to run this quick clip from The New Black to kind of give you a little bit of context about how that story was told.
That's what's up, man. It's a righteous man over here.
Okay, are you registered to vote? Okay.
How old are you?
21.
21.
All right.
You gotta get registered to vote. We gotta get you registered to vote.
I ain't voting on my own gay shit, though. Why?
Okay, why? What's up?
Don't even affect me, man.
Right,
Oh,
Joe.
that's not cool.
Vote
So
for
what made you be gay?
All right, that's what's up. That's
Right,
what's up.
so what made you be straight?
What made you be
Yeah,
gay?
What made you be
same thing that
straight?
made you be straight.
That just came off of this
Same
mic.
thing.
You can't answer that question, but you got
I used to not have the same rights as you, but I know that because a Black man like yourself stood up for a woman like me, I know that I got the same opportunities. So you as a Black man have the opportunity to stand up for somebody else. Whether you're gay or not, these are your brothers and sisters out here, and they need you to represent.
Who is you to tell somebody who they can't have sex with, who they can't be with? They ain't got that power.
Right.
Nobody has that power to say you can't marry that young lady. Who has that power? Nobody.
But you know what? Our state has put the power in your hands, and so what we need you to do is vote for. You gonna vote for 6.
I got you.
Okay? Vote
It's gonna
for
be the
6.
sixth thing. And all right, do y'all need community service hours? You do? All right, y'all can always volunteer with us and get community service hours. Y'all want to do that? We feed you, we bring you pizza.
So in the clip there, you see Karis and Sam, and they are talking to people out on the street, talking about voting. for marriage equality in Maryland. And this documentary talks about the intersections of being Black, of being gay, and also being Christian, and the ways that that impacts the conversation. So I wanted to talk about The New Black first, to kind of contextualize, how do we identify what Black LGBTQ filmmaking is? Does that mean that it's a Black cast, that it's a Black gay cast, as a Black gay filmmaker? How do you all kind of contextualize that? Go for it, Patrick.
I mean, I think it's kind of tough, but I think the subject matter needs to be gay and Black, first and foremost. And I would say at least one sort of creative force behind the project needs to be gay. Like, I think if Terrell McCraney wasn't the source material for Moonlight, we might be having a serious debate about, is Moonlight a gay film? You know what I mean? If all the creators of that film were straight, we might be having a different conversation. But for me, it's subject matter, Black cast, and at least one sort of creative person behind it. Leading. Okay.
What do you guys think?
I agree with Patrick, definitely. It has to be a story told from the perspective of someone who is Black and who is gay, whether that be the director, the writer. I'm not sure necessarily if the source content or whether the interpretation of it, as far as the director, maybe someone else wrote it, but the director is bringing an experience to it as a Black gay individual, lesbian individual, transgender individual. Definitely, we've kind of come across that before. We worked with people who were straight and supportive, but they had a very different take on the material that we were bringing to them, and we realized that this was something we had to kind of make sure the authenticity was brought to the projects, because we didn't want the stories to be told incorrectly.
Sure.
So yeah, definitely everything that Patrick said, it's kind of like mandatory.
Tosh, what do you think? How do we identify what is a Black LGBTQ piece of film or television?
I think it's pretty in the title. They need to be Black and they need to be LGBTQ.
Yeah.
Period.
When you say they, do you mean?
I mean the writer or the director. I think if it's the producer or the producers or any of the other supporting crew members, that is great, because that perspective informs every aspect of what people do. But for the work that's going to end up on the screen, I think it's important that the writer or director be Black and LGBTQ, identify as such, and really be able to bring the myriad of experiences to that project.
Okay.
And I'll just add, because there are projects that are considered, maybe a part of the Black LGBTQ experience that were not created by Black people, and I think we could all probably point to problems or issues with those, be it Paris is Burning or The Portrait of Jason, where there's an exploitative element to the way those stories were told, as interesting and groundbreaking as they are.
Okay.
So.
All right, so...
Can I just say something?
Yes, Yoruba, go ahead.
I think in documentary, which Patrick just mentioned, two of them, we actually have a real problem with this issue, especially in terms of our stories not being told by us as Black, LGBT, as just African American, put it even wider, people of color, in terms of documentary filmmaking. And it's something that's not often talked about, because it's seen, documentary is seen as kind of the social good, and you're telling an important story, which you definitely are. But there is a real problem we have in the field about filmmakers who are not, from our experience, telling our stories.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
As someone who moves between both documentary and fiction worlds, I would echo what Yoruba's saying, and I do think that it has become apparent to a lot of people, and I think that, with things like the Oscars So White, a lot of the conversations that are happening, I do think that those questions are being raised more, and those discussions are being had more. I'm looking at, Laura Poitras started a streaming collaboration with The Intercept, and they just did a collaboration with Stanley Nelson's production company called Firelight Media, and just the fact that that those two companies are talking to each other, and that they are doing a series called Our First 100 Days, you know, with filmmakers of color commenting on the first 100 days of the Trump administration, is really groundbreaking. And I do think that that comes from a lot of struggle and a lot of these issues being raised and a lot of the dialogue happening from the filmmakers' perspectives, and a lot of those perspectives that weren't heard before now coming to the foreground, and those opportunities coming to the foreground.
I want to turn to Patrick about Blackbird. Blackbird was obviously a really significant film that came out recently. I want to know a little bit more about that, but I want to play a clip from the film first.
That you gotta follow your gut, son, and be your own man.
Tell me, do you want to be normal?
Mom, I'm sorry. You tell me you sorry when you're not, and you know the Lord is watching us. You know we're being tested.
Almighty God, look down upon this child and heal him.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love.
15 seconds. A really powerful film. I want to know, for you as a filmmaker, why was this something important for you to do? Why did you feel like this was a story that you needed to tell?
Well, Blackbird is probably sort of a testament to, you know, how the work of an artist can affect, you know, future generations. So I read a book, Blackbird, by a black gay man, Larry Duplichan, written in the, I don't know, the 70s or 80s. As a freshman in college, and the way I found the book was I went to Harvard Square, went to the bookstore, and there was one row of shelves that were labeled gay and lesbian. And of all of those, scanning, there was one book where you could tell on the spine it had an illustration of a brown-skinned person. And that book was Blackbird. And so it was kind of a transformative experience for me to experience a work of art that was told from a black gay perspective for the first time. And as a burgeoning filmmaker, you know, I instantly wanted to sort of tell that story because it was a rich, wonderful story. So
I'm guessing you held on to it for a while until you were ready to make it, is what it sounds like.
I did. I probably wrote the first draft of that script in like maybe 1991.
Okay.
And it sat around on a shelf for a long time until a producer called and said, I've got someone with some money that wants to make a movie. Do you got anything? And they responded to the script.
What kind of response did you get from people about their feelings about the story and connecting with it or not?
I think a lot of young black gay men young and old, have had a similar experience because religion is often, you know, the sort of wedge issue between black LGBTQ people and their families in many cases. And so I think a lot of gay men appreciated it on that level. And women. And women too, yeah, absolutely. I think also it's just, again, we don't see stories like this. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in different ways and shapes and forms I have seen, you know, 17-year-old white kids coming out of the closet and coming to terms with their sexuality. but I was like, I've never seen it from a black perspective. So for that reason, it was important for me to tell the story in ways that it mirrored my own sort of coming of age. So, because we don't get, as black LGBTQ, we don't get socialized into, you know, dating and sex and all these things. So we have other, you know, we're forced to learn it on the streets, which is oftentimes not a sort of healthy place to learn these lessons. We don't have movies and TV shows and characters. There's no Will and Grace. There's no Queer as Folk. There's, you know what I mean? So it's important that we see these experiences.
You touched on sexuality and the ways that we kind of learn these things along the way. You guys are the creators of the DL Chronicles, where there's a lot about sex, sexuality, and the ways that men interact with one another in the Black gay community. Talk to me about how that came about and why it was important to you all to bring the DL Chronicles.
Well, at the time, it was a hot button topic. It was when we came up with this idea. J.L. King had released a book called, I think, On the Low.
Is it On the Low?
On the Low.
On the Dawn, yeah. And we saw an episode of Oprah Winfrey Show, and we were horrified by the narrative that he took. And we watched, two closeted gay men at the time, actors in Hollywood, watching this going, what the hell was that? So we're in the closet, we don't behave in the ways that we're kind of portrayed in this show, and suddenly...
And we all got painted with that one brush.
Yes, this one brush, and it was this black deviant man giving AIDS to our black women, and we were suddenly demonized, and I was like, Oprah, offer up, you know, another perspective. She usually does, and she kind of fell into the, so we were petrified. So ironically, at the same time, we were already thinking about doing, because of Patrick, had inspired us to kind of do some LGBT content, but we're going to do it in the closet.
Yeah, we're going to be the straight director producers of gay project.
We're just familiar with this content.
Yeah, right. So, but when we saw that, we knew that we had to not let that narrative be hijacked.
Sure.
And kind of give an insight to why these men are the way they are, why they're deciding to be this way. It's not all deviant behavior. There's religious aspects to it. There's misogynistic black gay culture. We had to say something. So, and then we came out with the project, which was also pretty.
I want to go to a question that came from Facebook, and I want to remind the people that are viewing right now, if you're watching live, jump into the comments and give us your questions and your comments, and we'll try and include the ones that we can into the conversation. You guys talked about being in the closet and wanting to do this kind of content, and Alicia asks, in your opinion, why do you think it's so hard for black LGBT people to come out? I'll bring it back to the table. Why do you all think that it's as difficult for us to come out, or more difficult if it is, than for other people?
I think the classic answer to that is really about intersections and how people identify and how people live their, like, what's the experience you want in life that allows you to prosper, right? Most of us want to belong. We want a sense of family and connection and ability to get jobs and gain access to employment, housing, etc. How are those issues impacted by the color of our skin? And then if you look at how they're impacted by the color of our skin, it's not hard to think why we would not want to come out. Because we're impacted in so many ways because we're black. So then if you say, oh, and you're LGBT too, who wants to add a marginalized community to their resume, right? And then be able to say, here's another way that you can discriminate against me. I'd like to give you a second reason, in case you were looking for one. And and in my case, it's you're a woman, you're black, and then you're LGBT. Here's 3 reasons that I have to discriminate against you in housing, in employment, and just social status and belonging and being able to hang out and enjoy your life. So it's really simple when you think about the reasons that people stay in. And I think it makes it stand out even more when people make the choice to come out. And then on a personal level, there's our family connections. So we're all looking at, I think a lot of the African American community is rooted in just that community. And when you come out, you risk losing that. In my case, for example, I belong to a big church. I knew that when I came out, I would lose that community. That community was my source and my belonging for 20 years. And when I came out, I lost that group, just plain and simple. That's painful. It's just at the end of the day, we're individuals who want to be loved and appreciated.
Well, and this past week, or last week, I should say, Jay-Z's album comes out, and his mom comes out on a track called Smile. And at the end, she talks about the reasons that we live in the shadows are sometimes about our protection, but the protection of the people around us, right? Or protecting ourselves from the people around us, in the way that you're talking about being in the church community.
Yes, I think we're protecting ourselves from criticism. You know, we're not known to be a shy people. We're not known to be a non-communicative people. So when you come out and say something, you're going to get a comment. You may or may not get, fantastic, glad to have you.
That's amazing.
That's fantastic. Let me make you some dinner. You're not more than likely going to, get that. Over time, I find in my family, over time that's what I've gotten, but I think a lot of us don't get that. And so you stay in and protect what's tender, and then just show people what you think you can handle them seeing.
Sure.
So I am out. I choose to live my life out. I encourage other people to be out, and at the same time, when people are in, I get it.
Sure.
Yeah. That's very.
You guys, go ahead, Yoruba.
Say one thing. Yeah, I think that Taj, what you just articulated was one of the reasons that I found that one of the reasons that I discovered, or one of the things I discovered while making The New Black. Initially I thought my film was about the, sort of the relationship between the African American community and the LGBT community around the marriage equality issue. Because I'd started the film after what happened in California with Proposition 8. And what I discovered through making this film was that this was a much larger issue in terms of how we in the African American community as LGBT folks create community, find community, want belonging, come out to our families, and fight for social justice. And the marriage equality part got, obviously that's the law that the referendum that they were working towards. But even in that clip, I think that we just saw, it's really a much larger thing. And marriage equality almost is kind of like metaphorical for acceptance and for, being able to live our lives as LGBT folks out in the open. So I think that's really, I think you're really right on point with that.
You touched on the politics of The New Black when there's a long discussion about marriage equality and the way that moved through the ranks and obviously became national law. I'm curious about the ways that you approach politics, and when I say you, I mean all of you. How do you approach politics? Because everyone's politics are not the same, right? We kind of assume that because we're black. From political circles, we talk about black people. All black people want this, and that's not true all the time. All gay people don't want one thing. How do you approach dealing with politics in your storytelling? And anyone can jump in on this one, but how do you stay away from it? Do you jump into it? How do you feel about that?
I'll just start real quickly, just in terms of The New Black, and in terms of my previous film, which wasn't LGBT focused, but was about the land reform in South Africa. And that I wanted to get both sides of the story. So an important character in the film is the black minister who is working against marriage equality working against passing the referendum. And I wanted to show that we are not monolithic as a community. And so for me, that was important in this story. And it's something that I'm interested in showing, the diversity of political views in our community.
Kind of taking diversity as a cue from you, I want to move to Rodney Evans. Both films you've done, Brother to Brother and Happy Sad. I want to kind of touch on the Happy Sad. I thought it was interesting the way that you juxtaposed very different types of relationships. And being in LGBT relationships, they're not always structured the same way from a heteronormative kind of perspective. So I was curious about how you came up with the idea for the Happy Sad and the way that those relationships blended. Can you unpack that for me?
What attracted me to it was this idea of dealing with issues of non-monogamy within the LGBT community. And when I saw the play, it was not written specifically for black actors. The actors in the original play were actually white, and I ended up making the decision to cast Leroy McLean because he was an actor who I just had seen on stage and thought was fantastic and really wanted to work with him. And I didn't want the tension in the film to be about racial difference, so I decided to cast an African American as his lover, Aaron. And so for me, it was really about these issues of polyamory and non-monogamy within the LGBT community, and just relating to these characters in the play and transforming that into something cinematic.
What I feel like happens now is there are numerous ways to reach your audience.
A lot of points of entry now.
A lot of points of entry. So if you're a filmmaker, your digital access may allow you the opportunity to make your product cheaper. And you have different resources for how you reach your audience. So you don't need to chase theatrical anymore, which in terms of finances for the average independent filmmaker is a really low on return investment for yourself and for your investors. So now you get a chance to go to Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and Crackle and YouTube Red and Do Good, and there are just so many options. Now, whether those platforms are Urban Movie Channel, whether those platforms are reaching for our content, for content by LGBT filmmakers of color, because I really do want to talk about filmmakers of color, because there's just there's a lot of intersections that we hit. Remains to be seen, but I do think at Logo, what we've tried to do in the last 3 years with this documentary division is make sure that we're speaking to people across various sections of their identity. So if you're Mexican American, if you're Native American, if you're API, and also LGBTQ identified, we want you to be able to find content within documentaries that focuses on all those aspects of your life. So if there's one thing that I can say has really changed, it's that we're no longer just talking to one aspect of a person's identity. We have to reach you across all the ways that you identify.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay, I think that's a great transition for us for back to the Dale Chronicles. You guys have really taken the streaming service idea or the YouTubes and all that and like really used it to the advantage of your show. And we have a clip from the Dale Chronicles, and we'll run that, and then we'll talk about how you guys strategize telling stories and the way that you went about doing that. So let's take a look at that.
It had millions of views across all of the streaming sites that it was being bootlegged. And as we began to learn this thing, we understood that, wait a minute, we have a direct connection to an audience, and the show continued to grow in popularity, even though it wasn't on television any longer. It was now on the internet, and that was worldwide access. So, you know, while we were going the traditional route, the show itself was just growing and building this whole new audience, a new generation of audience. And so, you know, that's when we realized, okay, we need to try to get in. At this point now, we kind of already missed the the beginning stages.
But it's a learning curve.
But it's a learning curve. And then it was a process of learning. Okay, we have our audience. We can provide content to them directly. Now, how do we get the money to make it? How do we monetize this? And so we tried various different models.
Sure.
Some didn't work. Some did work. And I think it's still by trial and error. But of late, we have done. We realized that your core audience, and I believe that someone was just saying that you need 1,000 true supporters.
Yeah.
Okay.
And those are the people who realize that this content that I want to see can't be made if it doesn't have money. We don't have a network behind us to pay for it, so I will pay $1.99 to watch this episode.
Okay.
And as your audience grows, we begin to see that it was actually a functional model. And so that's kind of where we are now, is trying to work with that model now that
going directly to the consumer.
Going directly to the consumer.
Sure.
Yeah.
Rodney, I know you wanted to comment. Go ahead. You wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, I think in terms of like career building, for me, as someone who handled the theatrical release of The Happy Sad on my own, and I thought it was really important to have those few cities play the film theatrically. So it played at the IFC Center in New York. It played at the Sundance Sunset Cinema in LA. And what that does is it generates a lot of critical reviews, right? And I think that actually puts a certain kind of branding and a certain kind of approval from critics and reviewers, and it separates your film from the thousands of other films and the other options that are on your Netflixes, on your Amazons, etc. So I guess I would argue that theatrical still is important if you're a filmmaker that is interested in the long-term career and having people kind of recognize who you are and being interested in supporting your future work.
You end up on the platforms without the attention that you might get. Sure, you're going to get your film out there, but there's nothing like spending 7 years on a project and then having it put effectively on a digital shelf even. So if you can have the opportunity for your project to be seen and for a network's PR department to get behind you and make sure that your film is reviewed across a national level, and then that it is available with press support for 3 to 4 to 6 months on a network, I think it's an advantage. And so while the digital, while the era we're in now expands your opportunities for exhibition, you do still have to ask yourself which one is most important for me and what I'm trying to do as a filmmaker.
Right. This kind of leads me to the next question that I wanted to talk about. As filmmakers, as writers, as producers, you're always pitching an idea. You're always going out with something that you want to share with people. I want to know about the no's that you've gotten. What those no's look like. We don't have enough money. We don't have the audience for this. What are those different kinds of things? And Patrick, I'll let you start. What are the no's that you've gotten? Because we know about the yeses, but how did you combat those?
Were it not for Babyface and Tracy Edmonds, there would be no Punks. And then Punks got into Sundance, and then no mainstream distributor would touch it. We ended up getting a small distribution through Urban World, but none of the mainstream. And this had William Morris, Kenny, Babyface Edmonds, and Tracy Edmonds. Noah's Ark happened because same kind of thing. I raised money for Noah's Ark from rich black gay men. And then we went around with the support of HRC and the Black AIDS Institute and screened it all over the country. And then Logo, which was kind of just starting up, heard the rumble through the kind of press because we started making noise, and they came to me and said, we want to put this on TV because, as often happens with new networks, they turn to alternative programming, i.e. black, to sort of launch their, as a launch pad because they want that niche audience to sort of make a splash. And then the skinny happened because I'd written 2 pilots for 2 different networks. Neither one got picked up, and so I felt like I'd wasted a year working on these projects. And I used my own money, shot Gay Pride Weekend, cut a little trailer together, went to Logo and said, you know my work, here's a film I'm working on, write me a check so I can finish it, and they did. And then Blackbird happened because one producer that I worked with said, I know this guy in the music industry, he's gay, he's got some money, he's looking for a film. And I pulled it off the shelf, and he liked it and said yes. So it's sort of like, there's no Hollywood institution that has ever said yes to anything black and gay that I've ever done.
Well, I mean, until you did it yourself.
Until I did it myself.
And they said yes.
But I've never had the experience of going into a meeting, pitching a script, a TV show, getting a development deal, going through that process, getting a green light, shooting it. That's never happened.
So it seems like everyone is figuring out alternative ways to get to the money, to get to the opportunity, to get to the talent. What are the ways that you guys have been told no, and how did you combat that?
Gosh, well, I don't know if we've ever been necessarily told no. We've been told,
not right now.
Not right now. We love your work, but do you have something else?
Yeah,
exactly.
That meant something else that was black and straight.
Okay.
We like what you did with this content, but we're not going with this content. And we also had, a very big cable network, one of the majors, basically told us, well, we're actually not going to be doing any more distinctly gay and lesbian content. We're going to be moving in the direction of a more integrative approach. We'll have gay characters, in our shows.
Yeah.
And that was during a period, and then I guess, as executives come and go, it eventually changed. But yeah, we got brought in. We got lots of meetings. We were in HBO, we were in Showtime, we were in BT. We had meetings everywhere because of the show. But no one at that time seemed to be actually interested in doing what they brought us in for.
So-
They wanted us to do something completely different.
So then, Deondray, as creatives, when you keep hearing that, like, oh, we love your work, but not this, and oh, this is kind of interesting, but what about that? How do you then decide, like, do we keep going this direction, or do we kind of figure out what they want? Like, how did you
Well, for me, I'm very stubborn. So,
okay. Which is a good quality to have.
Yeah, I'm very stubborn, and I think everything that we've achieved, everything that I've achieved as an artist, I've always just kind of believed in myself. I believe that if I want to see this, somebody else must want to see this. If I want to see it that bad, then I should probably make it. And so I've really never taken the no's as, well, maybe not with you. You know, or maybe I need to do this myself. Maybe I need to figure out what my resources are and pull those resources together and make this myself. That's kind of how we've functioned in general. And so that's what I do. I know that sometimes it can be disheartening. Sometimes it can snatch the rug from under your feet, especially when you feel really strongly about a project and somebody goes, eh. Yeah. So you go,
like, oh, that was cute.
Is it just good to me? And so what I try to do is I try to redevelop, I try to restructure, I try another angle, and then I try again.
I always use this example of sort of the telltale sign of Hollywood. When Punks premiered in 2000, there was another film at Sundance called The Broken Hearts Club. It was very similar in sort of themes and makeup, but it was white. And that film was by a filmmaker named Greg Berlanti, who's a friend of mine, who's wonderfully talented. This is not about he's more talented than I am. This is about two sort of equally experienced people in Hollywood at the time with two very similar films. One is white and gay and one is black and gay. 20 years later, Greg Berlanti is a TV titan. Every door in Hollywood has opened to him. And, you know, I've continued to make films, but because I've continued to make films, not because Hollywood sort of allowed me,
because it
or
embraced you,
opened the door, or embraced me. Absolutely, and that's kind of the way it's been traditionally, unfortunately.
The takeaway is really not to wait for permission, but just to get started. I mean, Yoruba and I are friends, and I remember being at the Schomburg Library and watching a tape of Richard Bruce Nugent with Yoruba, and us being like, "This is your movie. Holy shit! Like, this is it. This guy is amazing." Like you know, and there was no one there who wanted to tell that story. But I spent 3 years like researching his life and figuring out you know, who he rolled with and what his experiences were. And then that script became Brother to Brother. And then after you put so much time into something, you're not going to put it in a drawer and walk away from it, right? It has to get made, and so you start, you figure it out, you know. And so I think, you know, for me, it's the same thing as Patrick was saying. I've never gotten permission from anyone to make a movie. I've always just started and put one foot in front of the other and taken it one step at a time until the movie reached completion.
Yoruba, I know you want to jump in there. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to have been a part of that creative genesis with Rodney. My experience with The New Black, I found international distribution very difficult with this film. And a lot of, you know, it echoed what we hear about, you know, often in like the fiction world, like people aren't interested in Black stories, right? That's what they say. Internationally, they're not interested in Black stories. And what was interesting for me internationally, I did a lot of smaller film festivals internationally, film festivals that were often geared towards the Black community in places like Belgium and France and England and you know, other places. And they would say to me, the folks who were doing these film festivals and getting out this content, you know, this Black content, were like, we have nothing. And, you know, the mainstream distributors or festivals do not program for us in this country. And so it's, you know, but we're hungry for this work. Internationally, how a lot of our content is not considered not relevant, but actually when you talk to those audiences there, that's not the case.
Are we writing these stories and telling these stories for gay people? Or are we telling these stories for straight people to understand gay people? How do we figure that out? I'll let anyone jump in on that one.
I mean, for me, it's, in the past, I've been telling stories for gay black people. Like, I really started off telling the stories that I wanted to hear. It was about, I've never seen this story. I've never seen a black coming of age. I've never seen a story about a person living with HIV as opposed to dying with HIV. I've never seen a drag queen who's successful and in love. I've never, but as I get older, I find myself shifting a little bit now to where I'm trying to kind of do that, but at the same time, educate the straights, especially the straight black people, because I feel like that's the key to so many big issues in our community. Like, I feel like specifically young black gay men need to, their parents, their families need to understand what the obstacles and the difficulties that they're going to be facing are in terms of health and all these things. And so I've been processing it as I've been writing it lately about how can I do both? How can I educate and entertain our people, but also educate and enlighten our families and our communities? Because I feel like that's something that we need desperately to happen.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
I think it's the same for us. The funny thing for us is that we have backgrounds, educational backgrounds in psychology. So that's something that's always been an aspect of our writing, is trying to understand the person. So as much as we create, like Patrick said, for the community, because we know what we want to see, we know what our audience wants to see, but there's also another picture there of how we are explaining our lives and ourselves to our community and to the world as both black and gay individuals. So it's kind of hard to separate the two. I think it's just kind of natural that you tell from multi perspectives in one story.
Okay.
I would say that I think it's the Audre Lorde quote, right? That the personal is the political. That every time we're jumping into a story, we're jumping into it because there's some aspect of us inside of that story, and you want to tell it. And then as a result, you end up talking about things that are political. Like in the case of Forbidden, the film that is going to air on Logo next month, what was interesting to me about the story is that I'm from California. So clearly there's a very large Mexican American population here. And I find the marginalization of that community just despicable. The idea that that community is considered, just wholly expendable whenever we decide that it's so as a culture, and then yet we can consume all of the food and the art and the music, but then when it's time for the people, we just can't do that. And so then to come across an experience of someone who is Mexican American and LGBTQ and realize how vulnerable that kind of person really is, it just shocked me. And it felt like, maybe it's because I live in these various identities, right? That I say, I want this person's story to be told. I want people to understand so that you will never look at this person and decide, oh, he's other. He's not other. That's a human being just like you who's having this experience that deserves to be respected. And I think all of us want that experience.
Well, and I wanted to say about Forbidden. Forbidden really addresses like 3 intersections, right? Being a person of color, being gay, and being an immigrant.
Yes.
And that's a conversation that doesn't really get had a lot. So we actually have a clip from it. It's going to be airing on August 3rd on Logo, and we'll take a look at that clip right now.
I'm starting to face this rhetoric of, you don't belong here. Go back to where you came from. I have to live every single day with the fear that my family is going to be taken away from us. My name is Moises Serrano, and I'm queer, and I am undocumented, and I'm unafraid. I immigrated with my parents when I was 18 months old. They believed that if they came to this country and worked hard, that I could become anyone that I wanted to become. The people, united, will never be defeated.
How did this story of Forbidden come to Logo, and what was the thing that made you say yes to this?
It was great that you mentioned Outfest at the start of this, because that's where I first met the producer of the film, was at Outfest. And in watching it, I just thought, this is so timely and so topical. It also goes to the question of no's, right? I think people think as executives, once you're inside, that like your world is done. We get a lot of no's inside. And there are a lot of departments that you have to navigate to get to yes. So, and there are so many factors that go into it. So I knew that it wasn't the time to present it at that moment, but then in post the election, the agent brought it back to me and she said, what about now? And it felt like, exactly now.
Yeah.
Like this is exactly it. So we jumped on the opportunity, but thank goodness those filmmakers have been at this for 7 years and following his life and his family's life. But that's how it came to us, was through Outfest.
I want to kind of tie this up at the end, asking, why is filmmaking important? We have the people who are watching this, there's probably a lot of filmmakers in the audience that are wanting to be able to make a series, that want to be able to get a film done, that want to work within the networks and want to get documentaries done. Why is it important to you all to be filmmakers?
Well, I think it's one of the quickest way to disseminate information to people. The easiest way to get a message across is through the visual medium, entertainment. I was shaped by television. I was shaped by movies. A lot of the things that I do in my life, if I really am honest with myself, I go, I saw that once. And and kind of adopting some philosophies and messages. Yeah, and kind of playing that out in my life. So I think I've never been naive to the power of it. I've always, exactly the reason we did this show was because I knew that was probably the fastest way to get a message across. And luckily we also were in entertainment and thought of ourselves as emerging filmmakers. But I knew the way to get this across is tell it dramatically. And then suddenly these down low, double life, whatever you want to call them, closeted black gay men would suddenly be humanized, because now we were going to tell the story not only just in kind of academic sort of way, but just as people, emotionally, and have character arcs. So I think it's incredibly important to make film, and I think it's incredibly important that we have a diverse voice in filmmaking. What we are, all of us up here, we were unheard of years ago when I was growing up. If I had have seen a Noah's Ark when I was growing up, how different I would be, how different in my skin I would be. So it's incredibly important.
I wanted to add to that as human beings, we model. We model as from children. We model ourselves by the people that we see around us, the society, the community that's around us, and we don't have the opportunity of sometimes seeing beyond what we know. And films allow you an image of worlds and lives that you might not get to see.
It sparked possibility in your mind.
And spark possibility in your mind, and things that you're capable of possibly being or doing because of a movie. That's powerful.
Patrick, why is it important to you? Or sorry, Rodney, go ahead.
Yoruba. Rodney.
Something really quickly, and I feel like my impetus as a filmmaker was also due to a void that existed in terms of seeing Black LGBT characters. And I remember being so excited seeing Marlon Riggs's Tongues Untied and Looking for Langston by Isaac Julian, and they made it seem possible, right? And then I started to think about all of the stories that didn't get told, and not just contemporary stories, but also across history, right? And just that idea of all of these gay artists and writers within the Harlem Renaissance, and that being such a huge movement with so many talented writers and artists, and like not one movie being made about that time period. And so I think that not only is it important to just tell contemporary stories, but tell stories about our lives across history and where we come from, and people that can be looked at as the roots of Black LGBT art and experiences.
I just wanted to say, first off, ditto to everything that everybody else has said, but also too from a documentary perspective. Like, I started doing this because of stories, again, that weren't being told and voices that weren't being heard within mainstream media. I come from a kind of journalism background as well. And as we've seen just more and more year after year, especially with the political situation we're in now, the pressure around journalism to conform and now we're getting pressure from a president. But documentaries really have the power to explore issues in depth, tell stories, go places where mainstream news is not going anymore. Both internationally and nationally and within communities. And there's, my students are journalism students, but they all want to do documentary because they see this field as a place where you can tell these stories that are being ignored in mainstream media or being told from a different point of view, where objectivity, which is a phrase that's problematic in and of itself, but where you can talk about social issues or tell stories about social issues, have a point of view, and try to make change in society. I mean, that's part of my reason for doing it as well. How can I, use film to push for social justice and to make the world a better place.
For sure. Taj, Patrick, same question as we wrap up.
I think for me, it's like the hieroglyphs, right? We're still we're doing the same thing. We want to be known, we want to be seen. And when we're known and we're seen, we're felt as human, we're connected. And when the world is connected, to me, it's safer. That's my impetus.
Patrick, I'll give you the last word on that.
For me, it's just always been a calling. I mean, I can't remember, a time when I didn't want to be a storyteller. And when I discovered what a filmmaker was, I was able to put that sort of label on it. But I don't think, if it wasn't a calling, I don't think I would have spent the last 20 years doing the work that I've done, because I'm not rich. I don't have an island.
We're working on the island.
Tyler Perry. You know what I mean? So it's like, it has to be a calling, or else it's just the sort of whipping that you take trying to do this work day in, day out, and stay motivated and stay sane. It's not easy, or else, if I knew how to sell out, I would have sold out a long time ago. I think now, the beautiful thing now is that what the success of Moonlight kind of brings into focus is that it seems as though Hollywood is finally ready to recognize. It seems as though now being Black and LGBTQ is a bonus and not a detriment. Sure. It's like what they're looking for. They want you to bring that perspective. So I can get hired on a show like Being Mary Jane in season 4 and go in there, and I don't have to hide my gay. I throw it on the table and gay up the show as much as possible. So we have a new gay supporting character. We've got 3 separate gay storylines across 3 different episodes, very different sort of, points of view. That's because I think the world, the industry, the country is a little bit more open to it. So for the first time in years, I'm going out, taking meetings and pitching. I haven't pitched to a network or a studio in years and years and years, because I knew what the answer was going to be, so I wasn't even going to waste my time. Now, it's hopefully it's a new day.
Well, that kind of helps me get to my close. I want everyone to be able to tell people where they can find you on social media and what you're working on. Obviously, Being Mary Jane is coming back out on
July 18th. 10 more episodes. You do not want to miss these. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. It's just my name, no spaces or anything. Patrik-Ian Polk, Patrikian Polk.
All right.
And on Instagram and Twitter as Talk to Taj, even though I don't talk all that much. And Forbidden comes out on Logo August 3rd.
Awesome. Yoruba, tell us where people can find you and what you're working on.
I'm on Facebook, just my name, Yoruba Richen, and on Twitter at Red Rubes. And I'm working on a new feature documentary about trailblazing African-American female entertainers and their political and artistic work, and how they reshaped representation on stage and screen. And it's a African-American mess.
I love it. All right, and Rodney.
Hi, I can be reached on Facebook and Twitter at Rodney B. Evans. And I'm working on a couple of different things. A documentary about blind artists that features HIV positive photographer and African-American female dancer and African-American jazz composer. And so I'm editing that now. And then I'm also working on a fiction feature that centers on the experience of the openly gay jazz composer Billy Strayhorn, writer of the song Lush Life.
All right. Deondray, where can people find you and what are you working on?
Facebook and Twitter, Deondray Gossett, and officialdochronicles.com. We just released our DVD for the first time in a long time. We have a DVD out of the newest episode and a couple of bonus extras on there on Amazon.
Okay.
So just look up the Dio Chronicles Returns. That's the new title.
Yes.
All right. Where can people find
and I am on Twitter, Instagram, Q Lanier. That's QLENEAR, and I'm on Facebook under Quincy Lanier Gossfield, and we're also co-producing and directing a new documentary that is about the contributions of gays and lesbians to the Harlem Renaissance, which Rodney brought up, and it's a really cool project because it's integrating these micro short films. And instead of like the retelling of the story, we're actually doing these mini movies within it.
Nice.
So that's really fun, and we're happy that somebody came to us with that project. So
It does sound great.
That's awesome. Yes. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to thank you, our UMC fans, for watching on Facebook. Thank you so much for tuning in to UMC All Access. Make sure you go to our website, umc.tv. And make sure to check out our new iOS app as well. We really appreciate you being here. We appreciate all of you and all of your voices and all of your wisdom that you brought to the table. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on All Access.